scope of psychology of teaching and learning. Last week, we started the ball rolling of a three-part series of looking at some learning theories. And I think we were looking at the whole behaviorism. And we were looking at classical conditioning. We're going to go into operant conditioning today. When we started the lesson, we kind of clarified what learning was. What is learning according to psychology?
A change in behavior.
Long-term change.
Very good. A change in behavior, a long-term change in behavior, attitude, mindset, skills, and knowledge as a result of experience, whether that's psychological or that is through some social experience. All right, so that's how psychologists views and sees learning. And there's a reason for that because not all, Marianne, I'm not too sure what's going on. You hear me, guys?
Hearing.
I'm
Okay,
hearing.
Hearing.
Marianne, you might need to sign in and sign up. I know I'll go and listen. All right. So basically, not everything is something that we learn. There are some things that is built in our biological and psychological systems that cause us to particularly respond. So our human nervous system and our brains and everything is a part of that process. And so we looked at a theory and we decipher that because a lot of people have a misconceived ideas about theory. And we recognize that a theory is a well substantiated concept that has been tested over and over, various hypotheses been tested over and over, evaluated, so that we are able to describe a phenomenon and predict a phenomenon and also understand how it actually works. So theories have been conceptualized through research, lab, experimentation. And so a theory is not usually based upon one research. Sometimes it takes decades to develop a theory and to see what part of the theory actually is really of value. So one of the theories that we dived into last week coming out of the whole behaviorism movement was classical conditioning. And classical conditioning is a tool that many educators and trainers use and leverage to enhance engagement, to stimulate motivation in their learners, and to also utilize it for classroom management. And we learned that Mr. Ivan Pavlov was the engineer behind this whole idea. He stumbled upon it. It wasn't his main goal, but he stumbled upon it. And he recognized that people are organism learning two ways. You have the unlearned responses, the unconditioned responses, and the conditioned responses. Unconditioned mean those are the unlearned natural responses that doesn't need any tutoring, teaching, or need to show you something how to do it. And then you have the conditioned responses that has been learned something through some form of associative learning. So we understood that classical conditioning is a type of associative learning where two or three or more stimuli are repeatedly associated till there is a conditioned response. So what it tries to do usually is to condition something that was unconditioned by introducing a conditioned stimulus, which was a neutral stimulus. So it is usually very involuntary because they're going to use something to condition the organism, whether the dog or the animal. And basically, you recognize the process. There is a process. It is repeatedly done. And until there is a conditioning of the organism. So it has to be done over and over until, and sometimes it's not very easy because you have to factor in many variables like the developmental stage, you have to choose the right tools and all of these things. So we're going to look at that a little bit closer. We're going to go into operant condition. You looked at two case situations of how that pans out in the classroom in a lived way, and how educators, especially intentional educators, actually use classical conditioning to really do a lot of classroom management and to really stimulate motivation in their students. All right, so let's go there.
Sir,
Uh-huh.
I'm apologizing for Harold Howell, who is having some electricity issues. He's unable to attend class.
All right, cool. All right, so one of the things that we learned was about learning theories. A learning theory is an attempt to describe how people learn, thereby helping us to understand the inherent complex of learning. So learning theories is different from a learning approach. We'll explore that further. Please know the difference. Learning approaches is where you'll use a learning approach is like pedagogy, andragogy. But learning theories show you the why and describes and explains how people learn. So please don't mix up the two. Sometimes I think we do. All right. Um, all right, so this is where we were, operant conditioning. So we're going to look at another type of conditioning called operant. Operant conditioning has a more natural flow. You don't need to introduce something to condition the organism. So it has a more voluntary characteristics compared to classical conditioning. So they differ in that. So let's explore this. So operant conditioning, can somebody read that for me, please?
Operant
Good evening, everyone.
conditioning. Okay, go ahead, Sigan.
Go ahead, man.
Operant conditioning. The second type of conditioning is called operant conditioning. This type of associative learning facilitates the process of learning through reinforcement and punishment. In operant conditioning, Behaviors are strengthened or weakened based on the consequences of that behavior.
So the language of operant conditioning, to strengthen a behavior, it is considered a reinforcement, and to decrease a behavior, it is called punishment in operant conditioning. So it is based upon the principle, whatever the consequence that follows a particular behavior, it is predicted that that behavior would either increase or decrease in the future. Yeah, hand up.
Yes, it brought me back when I saw punishment, it brought me
Mhm.
back to this social media video that was going around where they'd have kids who were picky eaters and they'd like put like a toy, like a doll or a teddy bear, and they'd like feed the teddy bear some food, or it could be the other parent. They'd feed them some food, and if they said that if they shook their head that they didn't want it, they'd hit the parent, and then they'd try it with the child, and the child would take the food because they didn't want to get scolded. So
Mhm.
I was just thinking about it to say that I didn't even realize that that was classical conditioning. It was a social media trend that a lot of parents were doing, but I wasn't
Oh,
looking at it to say it's classical conditioning. But when I saw punishment a while ago, it came back to me.
yes. So a lot of these things that you see in our world are upon many of these learning principles that we have. We are pretty much. It's just that we are not conscious that we are learning beings and we are learning based upon the environment, and that science is actually panning out. It's just that when you understand the science, a lot of people will be able to more effectively know how to manage or manipulate the environment. And unfortunately, some companies spend a lot of money on people who are trained in psychology and education, and they will create programs and plans to capitalize on this learning ability. All right. So operant conditioning uses the language of reinforcement and punishment. Reinforcement means to increase a behavior, and punishment means you want to decrease a behavior. Now, operant behavior is the terminology that Mr. Skinner, the father of this innovative learning theory, he used to describe a behavior that was reinforced by the consequences that followed it. So those consequences play an important role in whether or not a behavior is performed again in the future. Skinner conducted most of his experiments, though, mainly with rats and pigeons, to determine how learning occurs through operant conditioning. And during his time, his theory was very innovative, and a lot of people also thought it was very weird. And, when people start to recognize that people were really being conditioned, especially like with gambling. All right, and we're going to touch some of these nuances tonight. So let's understand the science of operant conditioning and its terminology. So if you see positive in operant conditioning, it means you want to add something. All right. And if you see negative, it means to take away or remove something. So even though you have these words and you're associated with something, in operant conditioning, remember the context and the time and the history, these words had different meanings. So positive mean you want to add something, and negative mean you're going to take away something. And reinforcement means you want to increase the behavior of something, and punishment mean you want to decrease the behavior. So these are the language and the terminologies. So there are two types of reinforcement doing operant conditioning.
Hi, sir, could
And
you go back to the next the slide before, please? Hold on. 1 minute, 1 minute. Can go ahead. Thank you.
now there are two types of reinforcement. And anytime you say reinforcement, it means to increase a behavior. Anytime you say punishment, it means you want to decrease a behavior. Upfront conditioning is much, much easier to use. So a lot of lecturers, teachers, and training and development specialists, and even HR specialists, and even CEOs and bosses leverage this a lot. All right. So the first one you have is positive. And remember that positive means to add, and reinforcement means to increase. So you're adding something to increase a behavior. So for example, when a pleasant consequence follows a response, the behavior is more likely to reoccur. Notice it says pleasant consequence. So pleasant consequence and positive reinforcement is correlated. So the example, if a child picks up a toy and you give that child a praise, the child will more than likely pick up the toy again in the future. So the behavior is going to increase. So if you are the mother or the father of the child, and maybe the child has been putting his toy in the wrong place, and the child pick up the toy one time and put it in the right place, and you praise them, that positive reinforcement, the child's going to constantly, hopefully, begin to pick up the toy and put, because she wants to see mommy and daddy praise her. Because that feels good, and mommy is happy, or daddy is happy. Negative reinforcement, though, can be tricky sometimes, because you still want to increase, but anytime it's a negative, you're trying to remove something to increase the behavior. So negative and reinforcement is right. There's those two words coming together. When an unpleasant, so this is when it's unpleasant, consequence is removed. And by negative means removed. Following a response, the behavior is more than likely to reoccur, to increase. Yes, it might sound odd, but it is. For example, changing the baby diaper during the night stops the crying. The baby cries. You will more than likely get up to change the baby's diaper, even though the baby cannot speak. So when I sleep late at night, baby start bawl because him want to change him diaper. Him a bawl and him a cry and him a make up one heap of noise, waking up you and your wife. Wife will say, me have the baby all day, me nah get up, was there your turn. You have to get up out and sleep. No, you want to sleep. It's an unpleasant consequence. But nevertheless, because you want the baby to stop bawl, you go get up and you go change the baby diaper. The baby start associating this and realize them can't speak, but them can cry, and that is an unpleasant situation to your sleep, but you won't get up and the baby is going to continue and increase unless the parent does something to change that. Same thing with your cars. This is why when you go into your new cars nowadays, or you drive with a friend or whoever, when you go into the car, you hear that annoying sound. It's an unpleasant consequence. So more than like you're going to do what? What you're going to do?
Disconnect the sound.
You're gonna put the seatbelt on.
You're gonna put on your seat belt, but that's the way you can disconnect the sound. But the whole purpose of that sound, the reason why they put it there is because they recognize drivers are not putting on their seat belts. And so they decided to apply the principle of negative reinforcement to increase that behavior. The next is punishments. So as I said, punishment means to decrease a behavior. So you want to decrease something. So you have positive punishment. Remember, positive means to add something. So when an unpleasant consequence follows a response, the behavior is less likely to reoccur. Example, if a child pulls a dog tail and the mother slaps her, The behavior is less likely to occur in the future. It's called positive punishment. On the other hand, you have negative punishment. So when a pleasant consequence is removed from a response, the behavior is less likely to reoccur. Example, if a child grabs a toy from her sibling, the mother denies her from watching her favorite cartoon for a period of time. The behavior is less likely to occur in the future. But notice negative punishment. Something is being removed, but it is a pleasant consequence. It is something like the phones. Maybe the child love the phone and them on the phone and not doing them homework. So more than likely, the child is going to do them homework before them go on phone next time. So mommy and daddy has been practicing this science for quite some time on all of us, but we never know the tricks of the trade until we tap into a psychology class. All right? So what I'm going to do to help you to understand classical conditioning in the classroom, I'm going to let you watch this video and then on Edpuzzle. Are you hearing now, Marianne? Is Marianne here?
Yes, sir, I'm hearing now.
Okay. All right. Go to that video for me. You're already familiar with Edpuzzle. Watch it for 5 minutes. It's going to explain how it pans out in an educational context. All right. And then we'll come back for our discussion.
Should there be a video playing? Because I'm not hearing anything.
Go into the chat and touch the Edpuzzle video. It's a flipped classroom strategy, and watch the video, please.
Sorry, I'm not sure, but I'm not seeing anything.
All right, let me post it back again. Not too sure why you're not seeing. Check the main classroom too, the general section. You can get it from there as well. You see it now? I reposted it.
Stuff loading. Let me see. Don't know, maybe it's my internet connection.
I know it's saying that the media player isn't supported for me, so the
Yeah,
video is not playing.
mine
for
is
me.
not playing either.
Not playing?
Mm-mm.
Okay. But you don't need to update to the platform. Well, you guys never had problems with it before. What is happening now? It's the same platform, you know. Let me revise here.
After each
All right, please to note that you're supposed to answer the questions, so it will stop at certain situations. So let me play it here and then see.
operant conditioning is a type of learning where the consequences of your behaviors shape your future behaviors.
Which one is the answer? It won't move on.
Future behaviors.
Those consequences may be either a reinforcement or a punishment. We will be focusing on the following terminology:
Consequence of operant and
Reinforcement or punishment.
After each example, we'll see how the terminology can fit into this chart as to whether a stimulus is being presented or removed, and whether the subsequent behavior increased or decreased. For our first example, we have a student who is working diligently on her schoolwork. As a consequence, the teacher could show his appreciation for her hard work by providing positive feedback. In return, the student continues to work hard. In that example, we had a stimulus being presented, which caused behavior to increase. Therefore, we would call this positive reinforcement.
all right, when a student is working hard and the teacher sees and celebrate by giving them positive feedback, you're doing so well, and this motivates the student to even work harder. This is called
Positive reinforcement.
Positive.
For our next student, we again have a good student who is working diligently on her coursework. As a consequence, he could remove some of her work, such as dropping a quiz or removing a homework assignment. This would make her happy and want to continue to work hard. In this example, a stimulus was removed, that was the quiz or the homework assignment that was being removed, in order to cause the student's good behavior to increase, which would be negative reinforcement.
Sandy was given a homework pass from her teacher because she did all her homework for the week in class. This made her happy and made her want to continue to do her homework more. This is called
Negative reinforcement.
For our third example, we have a student who has fallen asleep during class. As a consequence, the teacher may get upset and verbally scold the student to wake him up. The misbehavior of sleeping would then stop and the student would start to focus on classwork again. In this instance, a stimulus was being presented, the verbal scolding, in order for the misbehavior to decrease. So we would call this positive punishment.
Tom was sleeping in Mr. Charles' classroom during the lesson. Mr. Charles scolded him and said it's too early in the morning for you to be sleeping. Tom quickly snapped out of his sleep to focus on Mr. Charles' lesson as a result. This is called
Positive
Positive
punishment.
punishment.
In our last example, we have a student who is using their cell phone during class. As a consequence for this misbehavior, the teacher could go over to the student's desk and confiscate the cell phone. The student's misbehavior would decrease and they could focus on their work again. So, due to a stimulus being removed, the misbehavior decreased, which would be negative punishment.
Mr. Sandy made a rule in our class that no cell phones will be used in our class without our permission during the class time. During one of our lessons, she caught 2 students using their phones and confiscated them for a week. This caused the student to stop using their phones in the class. This is called
Negative punishment.
Negative punishment.
Negative punishment.
And those are the basic types of reinforcement and punishment.
all right. Was that video clear enough?
It helped a lot.
All right, good. It should have been a flipped classroom strategy, but I don't know what was going on with some of your and all right, so you said it was very clear in how it is applied in the educational context. All right, so I just made this just to kind of help you to conceptualize operant conditioning. So operant conditioning is at the top, and then reinforcement and punishment are at the sides. Reinforcement, you want to increase a behavior. So anytime you want to increase something, think reinforcement. If you want to decrease a behavior, it is some punishment. And then it branches off. Reinforcement have both positive and negative. Positive is associated with a pleasant consequence in following the behavior. It's more likely that it will increase in the future. Negative reinforcement, it's an unpleasant consequence is being removed, but you still want to increase that behavior in the future. And then under punishment, you have positive punishment. An unpleasant consequence follows to decrease that behavior. And in negative punishment, a pleasant consequence is removed to decrease that behavior. As you can see, the operant conditioning, you're shaping the behavior of the learners. But you're using these tools and using the science of operant conditioning to do it. Because you want for the classroom to flow. You want a particular flow. And if anything is going to cause that flow of your lesson or your training, you're going to know you have to shape the learner's behaviors. And this is some of the things you have to do. You have to use reinforcement and punishment, depending on the behaviors you want to increase and depending on the behavior you want to decrease in the classroom. All right, and so you have to know what is the positive punishment you want to use. For example, you want them to speak. Some of them might be shy to speak, but you can say, Tom, somebody speak. You ask somebody to share something. One of the ways you could do the positive reinforcement for that individual, you could say, Tom, I really appreciate when you stand up and share your opinion. It will really add value to the class. So you can acknowledge it to Tom. And that will cause Tom to feel that he needs. And then you can use that and say, students, I would encourage you to speak because when you speak, you better understand the lesson. See what Tom is doing? And it sends a message to the rest of them. So you want to increase that behavior. But if people are using cell phones in your class, you don't want them to do that, right? So you're going to go over punishment. And so you're going to say, okay, if anybody uses phone in my class, I'm going to take 5 minutes from their lunchtime. Or better yet, what I would do if I was I'd put them into groups to take off the burden off of me and label each groups, put up points on the board or on the PowerPoint or a game or something from a computer. And if any of the group members fall out of line, I say, okay, group A, I notice that Tom is out there using phone, you have lost 5 points. And so it looks like you're already losing points to get the nice cake at the end of the month. You don't know that the group is going to deal with him. So you're shaping the behavior. So you can take off the responsibility off of you by putting them into groups. Groups to sweep up class, group to dust the board. You don't have to do anything because you're teaching them leadership skills. That's what you're doing. You're teaching them social skills. You're teaching them how to work together. You're teaching them interpersonal. So if anybody asks, you can contend what you're teaching them. But you're using the science of operant conditioning to do that. All right. And this is where you can leverage the troublemakers. You can use them as a form of stimulus in the classroom to help you to manage your class as well. All right. So pretty much we are finishing classical and operant conditioning. And so I want you to be able to describe or distinguish, compare and contrast. Based upon the slide on the PowerPoint, how would you contrast these two conditioning principles? What makes them distinct? How would you describe them to somebody?
Sir, could you repeat the question, please?
How would you describe, if somebody was to ask you, could you explain the difference between classical and operant conditioning? How would you do that?
Okay, thank you.
I would think that the stimulus for the classical conditioning, the stimulus comes first.
Definitely.
And for the apparent conditioning, it is the opposite. The behavior comes first, the behavior that you want.
Awesome.
Right.
All right, Miss Henry. Awesome. Very, very good. Anybody else? What are some of the nuances between classical and operant conditioning?
For the operant conditioning, the behavior is voluntary.
Definitely.
Classical conditioning, it's involuntary behavior.
Definitely. Anything else? That is distinct between operant and classical conditioning.
Operant can
One
either
is voluntary and one. Sorry.
Sir, I can try for classical.
Mm-hmm.
For the classical, the behavior is triggered by the stimuli, just like at with the dog and the bell, and then the other for the operant, the behavior triggers the punishment, I guess.
Behavior triggers the punishment.
Or determines the punishment.
Yeah, but we want to expand on that. Elaborate on that. Elaborate. Yes, use the science. Elaborate on that for me, please, Miss Russell.
Let me think.
It's right there before you, you know. So capitalize on what is there.
Determines the consequence, whether good or bad punishment. That's what you want me to say, sir?
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
where
know.
that's a theme that you're on. That's a theme that you're on. You just need to expound it, explain it better, elaborate on it better, to let your brain kind of marinate the information as well as you are teaching others. Right? So basically, operant conditioning, if you want to increase or decrease a behavior, it basically focuses on you trying to encourage, discourage, or increase and decrease a behavior, but that's based upon a consequence, whether good, positive, or negative. But for classical, it's you're trying to connect an involuntary response, it's an unlearned response with a neutral stimulus. So you're trying to condition the involuntary response, the natural response, the unlearned response with the neutral stimulus. So there's an associative learning process that's going to happen to condition, to eventually the neutral stimulus becomes a conditioned stimulus, a learning tool. All right? Because you must be able to explain it so that you're able to.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, so and another thing that distinguishes them, one was established by Ivan Pavlov, one was established by Mr. Skinner. So even though it's two conditioning principles, they're distinct. And I'm going to show you why, because we're going to continue explaining some of the stuff that operant conditioning discovered that is also very vital to helping you for classroom management and for helping you to shape behavior. All right. So we're going to look at schedules of reinforcement. This is coming out of operant conditioning and positive reinforcers. This might now help you to recognize some of the tools. For example, we touched some of those tools in classical, like clapping, getting those attention grabbers, or using any device as a form of instrument. That can be a positive reinforcer. Schedules of reinforcement, though, helps you to create developmental interventive programs to help shape students' behavior. All right? Whether you want to increase that behavior or decrease that behavior. So positive reinforcers. Now, positive reinforcers, this is what it's called in the whole behaviors movement. They're used primarily with operant conditioning. So a positive reinforcer is anything that is added following a behavior that increases the likelihood of that behavior occurring again in the future, like praise or celebrating. Rewards are often given to children when they engage in desirable behaviors, but the reward does not cause those. But if the reward does not cause those behaviors to increase in the future, then the reward is not actually a positive reinforce. So that's a distinction that you need to understand. So a positive reinforce is anything that is added following a behavior to increase the likelihood of that behavior in the future. So there's a particular behavior you want to increase, you're going to look for some positive reinforcer, whether that is praising, whether that is giving them homework pass, whatever that is. So it's breaking it down now to using the kind of tools you use in the classroom to help you to shape behavior, to increase behavior that is positive or that is constructive or that is purposeful or that will help the class not to move forward properly. So types of reinforcers, you have the direct and natural one. A child's positive behaviors and social interactions are naturally reinforced in the environment. The natural consequences of the positive behavior becomes reinforcing themselves. Example, the child says ball, and an adult hands the ball to the child. Those are called direct and natural reinforcers. So the mere fact that the baby said ball, you say, wow, the baby is saying ball. Okay, honey, here. That reinforces that positive behavior. So access to the ball is reinforcing and increases the likelihood of the child requesting the ball in the future. Then you have social reinforcers. A child's behaviors are reinforced by positive social interactions. So social reinforcement can include smiles, tickles, high fives, and praise. So praise is actually a social reinforcer, and it's usually used to increase a behavior. Activity can be used as well. So we're breaking it down for you here. Access to fun activities can serve as reinforcers for child's behavior. A child finishes all his chores. Activity-based reinforcement could include access to a computer game for 20 minutes, or it could be that you say in your class you have a playroom or something like that. Students who finish their work or everybody who did their homework will have 20 minutes in the play area. And so when students see that, they're going to want to do their homework. For training and development activity, it could be, for example, those who come to work early, you get one free meal every week. So they might come early. Or it could be an activity where you create something where them have to do something that will give them some prize or something, some leverage. Or them get some pen or some access to something. Or say like the gym, those who come early will go to get a free pass, a 1-day free pass to the gym or something. Or them get maybe some gym, them get 30 minutes or 40 minutes aerobic instruction directly without paying for that. So you have to think along those lines in talent development. Tangible now. A child's positive behavior is reinforced by access to desired items that may not be related to the specific behavior. Example, a child who labels a color correctly is given a piece of cookie or sweetie or Burger King or $500 to go buy food or something. So those are tangible. So these are the tools that you utilize in operant the positive, especially positive reinforcement. Schedules of reinforcement. Somebody read that for me, please.
Schedules of reinforcement refer to the patterns or rules by which reinforcement is delivered following a specific behavior. In other words, they outline when and how often a behavior is rewarded.
Now, educators, you are on the show of your learning environment. So these are the tools that you're going to use to shape behavior. Remember, we talked about the intentional teacher. This is what distinguishes them. They understand schedules of reinforcement. They know exactly when a behavior should be rewarded and how and what they're going to use to reward that behavior to increase it or to decrease it in the classroom. So you're not fair shout and I do all kind of manners of evil. And I lose your stress and I go on all kind and I lose your head. All right? Schedules of reinforcement. There are usually two. One is continuous reinforcement, one of the most easiest. This happens when the desired behavior is reinforced each time it is observed. It is the quickest way to get someone to develop a new behavior. And then you have interpartial reinforcement or intermittent reinforcement, also called partial reinforcement. This is the one that most educators use because it's more applicable to the working context. So intermittent reinforcement is the delivery of a reward at irregular intervals. Partial reinforcement has 4 types: fixed interval scheduling, variable interval scheduling, fixed ratio scheduling, and variable ratio scheduling. So continuous reinforcement is usually used more in a natural kind of environment, but it doesn't function very well in structured environment like workplaces and stuff like that. So most people use partial reinforcement. One of the reasons why continuous reinforcement is not utilized much in like a training and development context or in the classroom because of satiation or satiation. I think it's satiation. Satiation, I believe, is sometimes a reinforcement can lose its value. All right? And stop shaping a particular behavior. All right? So let's look a little closer at schedules
For
of
one sec, can you go back to the previous screen for a minute, please? Thank you.
So let's kind of break it down because you're going to do an activity where you're going to apply this kind of program. So you have partial reinforcement schedules can be based on interval or on a response rate, which is ratio. So look at the schedules on the screen. For example, fixed interval schedule. You're very commonly aware of this. An exact amount of time passed before each reinforcement. Example, your exam coming at the end, well, you don't have any exam, but your exam that would usually come at the end of the semester. So studying for a weekly quiz. So if quizzes are part of the thing, every week, then that's a fixed interval schedule. Who are try classically or operant condition, me know. With nice. And then, we good? And then getting your paycheck every 2 weeks or every end of month is called fixed interval schedule. Yep. That is why when it's late to not go on, so. Because it's fixed. So you see how these principles are used in the real working world? The variable interval schedule, though, and a varying amount of time passes before each reinforcement, checking your email, winning a video game. And the variable one is quite powerful because it gives a sense of predictability, but unpredictability at the same time. So that's why you check your email maybe every hour, every other hour, or whatever. A certain amount of time is passed before you do that, but you will go back and check your email. It's not like the fixed interval, like at 1 o'clock, 12 o'clock at lunchtime every day. That's a fixed interval schedule. Fixed ratio schedule, on the other hand, reinforcement occurs after a fixed number of responses. So ratio is response, interval has to do with time. So example, getting 1 free meal after the purchase of 10. So just like how I tell you, so if them come early, maybe there is a lateness issue in the office, and you create a program, a fixed ratio program, in which after 2 weeks, them get a free lunch in the canteen them have to pay for. So all of them, they when I buy up with something them, a fixed ratio schedule them a work pan on. Yeah, man. That them that do. Right? Losing your driver's license after 5 violations. Yes, that's a fixed ratio. And you can use fixed ratio as a form of discipline in your class. Students, like for example, when I had Mr. name as a principal, he had a 3 strikeout. And him say, if you come to the principal after the 3rd one, suspension for 1 week. So 1, and him come and him to tell you, and him say, okay, this is your first one, so you have 2 more to go. And him say, okay, you only have 1 left. And if the third one come, you get suspension. And then you have the variable ratio schedule now. This is where it can be quite powerful to shape behavior. Reinforcement occurs after a varying number of responses. Playing the lottery, that's why people are addicted to lotto. The number of shots to score a goal in a soccer game. So gambling is based upon a variable ratio schedule. You're not too sure when you're going to win. You might win one time, but you certainly don't know when you're going to win that again. So you keep on going. For example, in the classroom, you could use a variable ratio. For example, you could say, for a young man or a co-worker is not well groomed a lot of time and you spoke to them consistently. And then one day they came very well kept and well put together. And I said, whoa, Tom, are you that? No, man. Get up on the right side of the bed this morning. You look dapper this morning, man. That's how you have to do it. Keep it up. Next day come, you comment him again. Wow, nice. I like the new look. I can see that you're really putting some effort into your work. But the next day, you don't tell him. You kind of ignore him purposely. Next day, ignore him purposely. Other day, you ignore him purposely. And then maybe about sometime later down, you acknowledge him again. But he doesn't know when you're going to give him that reinforcement. So it increases motivation towards the kind of behavior that you want to shape. So what the lot of people, them and the gambling people do is just shape the behaviors of these customers. That is why them have dream and all kind of stuff. So this is what they have done. Even when you think about education, you know that we don't do. But may I leave that one there alone? Not touch that, all right? So these are the 4 ways that you can structure your program for maybe students who are challenging, for maybe classes that may be very, very challenging. You can look for schedules of reinforcement and create a program, and you can test it out and see which one works for you based upon the developmental needs of the students. So what we're going to do now, we're going to put this into practice. All right, quiz. Getting your paycheck every 2 weeks is what kind of schedule of reinforcement?
Fixed interval.
Fixed ratio.
Fixed interval.
Fixed rate.
Fixed interval.
Fixed interval.
Remember that ratio mean responses, interval mean what? That's so you get you get kind of understand. Interval means
Interval
what?
is time.
Time.
Okay, time. So getting your
Time.
paycheck every 2 weeks is what kind of schedule of reinforcement?
Fixed
Fixed
interval.
Interval.
Fixed interval. So that's how you can distinguish them. All right? Correct. So what I want you to do now, this is the last activity for this lesson. I'm going to lesson 6. You're going to place in 2 groups. Each group will be given a case scenario. One will be classroom, one will be training and development. Your task is to design a targeted intervention designed to address case scenarios. You're going to choose a suitable positive reinforcer or reinforcers and choose a schedule of reinforcement that can positively help improve or solve the issue or shape that behavior. So let me go into your classroom to show you some of this, the tools that you have at your disposal to do this activity. So, all right, you can utilize the attention getters. They can be used to shape behavior, but this is your case scenario here. You can look for that. It says case scenario, schedule of reinforcement updated. As you can see, you'll see group 1, you're the classroom, group 2. I'll label the groups, and here are the instructions. You're going to program design. So you're going to choose a schedule of reinforcement that you feel is suitable with a fixed ratio, variable ratio, and you're going to use positive reinforcers to shape or to intervene with that case scenario. You're going to implement a step-by-step process in the classroom or in a training and development situation, and you're going to talk about the expected outcome, how you think the behavior will increase. All right. So in the classroom as well, I think in that lesson you have I have your positive reinforcers right here. So you can look at this. These are some examples that may assist you in choosing. If you can look at tangible, social, and activity with examples that you can utilize. And I think as well, I've placed in there another tool, schedules of reinforcement. You can look at this as a guide to guide you so you can know what each reinforcement does, continuous, and break it down for you and what it does as well, the advantage and the disadvantage, all right? So that's what I want you to do. So let me label the groups and then give you about 20 minutes to sort out that. Group 1, your classroom. Group 2, your training and development. Right. So 15 minutes. All right, your groups are now open. Can go now. On. Mr. Gordon, you okay?